This program is sponsored by Safe Life Experience Consult Limited. Contact them for all your travel and tour needs, as well as your events. Welcome to the conversation, and today I am pleased to have Reverend Father Dominic Nolan, a Colombian missionary working in the Philippines and with experience too from Australia. Father, you're most welcome to the conversation with Augustus Akins.
Thank you.
And I'm very pleased to have you on the show.
Oh, I'm glad you're pleased. I'm nervous.
So, Father, 50 plus years, who is a missionary priest?
All right. Difficult question. In some senses, I can give you the simple answer. We're all called to be missionaries. But a missionary priest, something different, something full-time. That's my permanent job. I don't like to use the word professional. It sort of, it takes us, for me, it takes the spirit out of it. But someone who leaves their own culture and works in another for the kingdom, for Jesus, in other words. But the older I get, the more I see it's a team effort. You don't do it alone, you do it with a group. You don't do it alone, and you don't do it in isolation. And you do it together with other people. You do it with the cooperation of people. These days, where people have been right through the world, and the Word of God has been preached, as primary things that missionaries do, preach the Word of God. There's another thing coming forward in meaning of missionaries. Missionaries doesn't mean to be put in one place. The missionary comes in and sees where the church should be going. Something that preoccupies us is, how do we advance? Where do we go from here? Ideally today, look, we've got this virus. The church, the world, humankind will never be the same again. Now I could panic and I could get worried and I could sort of say, hang my head, woe is me. No. We've got to promise the Lord will be with us. Yes, disasters happen. Do we want them to happen? No. Do we want to be comfortable? Yes. But apparently that's not the way with the Lord. He calls us to be in difficult places. He doesn't leave us and he doesn't take away the difficulty, but he works with us. I don't know what's coming. I'm nearly 76 next month, and what do I do? But I've been thinking in these last few weeks, right, what should I be doing in my last few years, perhaps working in a different country, in the Philippines? What should I be doing? Maybe, I don't know yet. I have an ecological place. And maybe I'll be directing the rest of my life in teaching young people how to provide food for themselves and their families in an organic, self-sustaining way. And anything I can do that to build better food, better water, better air, do something for the earth, that's what I'm going to do. Missionary means a lot of things. Sometimes it means to challenge the local church, the local community. Challenge them to say, hey, you belong to a bigger thing than you realize. We're not just sustaining ourselves. We're always looking out to be inclusive, to be participative, meaning we want people to join us and work together. Many things. To be humble enough to know that perhaps you haven't got all the answers. And yet have trust and faith to say, okay, Lord, I will look, I will think, I will pray, I will go into the direction I think I should be going, and then do it. It's quite different. People like me from a Western country, we're dinosaurs. You don't see us anymore. Do I regret that? No. We had our day. I did what I thought I should be doing, and went through the normal process of discernment and, making mistakes and doing this and that and built. Would I do things differently? Maybe yes, maybe no, but I think I certainly would put people more to the front. Forget about buildings, they're necessary. Forget about big programs, but concentrating on looking after people and calling people forward. I think that's the job of a parish priest. I felt it was my job anyway, to have a look and see who's there and to challenge them to say, listen, you've got this talent. We need it. And we need it for the whole community. We need it for a diocese or a parish or a smaller community in a village or a barrio. And I think I would do things a little bit differently.
You are listening to the conversation on Radio Angelus, the online radio station belonging to the Catholic Archdiocese of Accra, and also you are watching live on YouTube on Conversations with Augustus, and I'm very delighted that you are watching and also listening to us on Radio Angelus. Please do not forget to like, share, and let's also hear from you with your comments, as well as subscribe to this very channel. Father, you've mentioned a lot of things. Let's look at the culture aspect of it. Australian working in the Philippines as a missionary. Weighing the two, coming from a different culture, having to embrace a new culture to be able to spread the word of God, which you were sent to do. How difficult was that for you?
Extremely difficult. First thing is language. And I think that's when I had my first mental breakdown. Not quite, but that's when I had the first huge thing. Australians or Westerners coming into a situation, especially the Philippines, where most people can speak 4 languages. And that is no mean feat. And that is quite an achievement. Speaking 4 languages, terrific. We come in and it looks like, I've often expressed this, like a wall that we have to punch our way through. Whereas Filipinos, where I've worked for most of my life, they seem to walk around the wall or go underneath it or go over the top of it and don't worry about language, but more important are the people and how do I get along with the people. And they're interested in people, how they do things, what they eat, what they love, and they're interested in them.
So are you saying doing the right thing is very difficult?
Doing the right thing, picking up language is very difficult. And then picking up the way the people do things, the way the people celebrate, like birthdays. How do you celebrate the birthday? Quite different. Whereas in Australia, we'd have people would come and they'd celebrate a birthday in your home and they'd bring presents, etc. But in the Philippines, you're supposed to put on everything. You're supposed to provide everything. And presents, if you bring one, you put it down by the door and walk away from it. And I got surprised. Why did they leave my gift there on the side? I thought it was a very nice gift. And well, they're telling you, the gift is not the important thing. You're here. That's the most important thing. Big lesson for me to learn. And there's all sorts of things. When to laugh, when to cry, when to speak, when to shut up. What about children? Can they speak in an adult conversation? What about married women? What about older people? One of the things I've learned in the Philippines, respect given to age. They've gone through all these things that younger people are going through, and they've survived. Respect this way. And it's very hard because you don't really know what to do. So I'm surprised. For instance, a marriage. I'll tell you a story. I'm alone in the parish. I have many things to do. And here comes the Filipinos' way they use time. Not very important. And arriving at 9 o'clock is not very important. They'll come, or they mightn't come. They'll say, yes, we'll come, but all it means is it might happen or it mightn't happen. No word for no, N-O, in Filipino, because they'll always say yes to make you feel happy. And it's very hard to adjust that way. But a wedding might come in a certain time. But you might say 9 o'clock and you have another appointment at 10 o'clock or 11 or 12, and they don't arrive till 1:30. Now, I find that very hard to sit around and wait for 3 or 4 hours. But the story is this. I was going crazy. One man in a parish, many things to do, and how to organise my time. An older priest, lovely guy, Mel Sherrod, God bless him, he's with Jesus now. I said, Mel, I'm going crazy. I don't know how to organise my time. Well, he said, that's simple. He said, you tell the people, look, you can have an hour's photograph before 9 o'clock, but don't forget, at 10 o'clock, there's a funeral coming. And of course, no one wanted to be around at a funeral. They would make sure they'd been there at 9 o'clock. I didn't get high blood. Everybody arrived in time. I was very polite. So, how to adjust to a situation, how to be human. Hold your principles, but be very human in your response. Now that's all very well, but if you're on your own and you're working many hours a day, you get tired, and the biggest thing is to never lose your cool. You lose your cool, you've lost it. So, Philippines, I'm just so grateful, delighted. I had an opportunity. Things that I do naturally, when I go back home, people stop and say, why that? Why do it that way? But I've been taught so much, and the opportunity to participate in so many things.
You becoming a missionary, first of all, what actually struck you to become a missionary priest and not a diocesan priest?
Good. My name is Dominic. I grew up in the Dominican parish, and these guys were missionaries really coming from Ireland, all Irish, into my parish in Australia. They were great guys. They were young guys, full of hope and laughter and fun. And my mum and dad were good, and they were always at home. But their life was one of study, books, and it didn't appeal to me. Now that I'm older, I understand the value of study, the value of good research, the value of professionalism in all sorts of ways. But it wasn't what didn't attract me. I love the Dominicans, so I always have a soft spot. My name is Dominic. I met a Colombian, and he had been in China, and he was a local lad, and I just I was attracted, first of all, by his stories. He had terrific stories, but just the way he was happy. He went to China, he got imprisoned, he got thrown out, he got back to Australia, and he had all these wondrous talks and things that he gave, and he attracted me, and I said, yeah, I want to do that. And I remember when I was in third year high school, my dad said, Dom, what do you want to do? My dad was a technician with telecommunications, and he said, I can look after you to high school, but from then on, you're on your own. So I said, okay. So he said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to be a priest. He said, okay. You sure? Well, Dad, that's what I want. He said, okay. Whatever you do, it's okay with me. So I joined the Colombians, and have never regretted it. We're different. I'm thankful for the ones who I'm with. I think they've challenged me, they've supported me, they've shown me a new way, they've challenged me in things when I'm going the way that they didn't think I should be going, and they inspired me to go other ways.
When you spoke to your dad about you becoming a priest, and your dad was also truth to you that he wouldn't be able to take care of you after high school, how was that feeling?
To be perfect, I didn't even worry. I didn't even think about it, really. I said, I'm me, and I would go and do it. And finances didn't cross my mind. That was the beauty of it. It didn't cross my mind. I said, who were the Columbans? This was the Columbans. I applied. I was accepted. Finances weren't even mentioned. There was an understanding. You'd do what you could, and they'd do the rest. And never once was I ashamed. But I'm ashamed of my brothers and sisters. They're so good to me. When I go home, I have to be very, very careful. I have to shut my mouth. Because if I say I like something, bingo, they give it to me. They're terrific. So I have to be very, very wary and not exploit that. And don't be someone who it's about me. So I never thought about it. And it was well after I was ordained, I would say, the Columbans, we invite you, we appeal, we say, will you help us in our work? Part of the work is providing an education for young men. And that in those days, that was great. And it was just there. So it wasn't a problem.
Okay, so that wasn't a problem. And your siblings also supported you in your formation period whenever you asked for anything. But tell us about your family.
Family? Family growing up, World War III. Meaning, oh boy, I have an older sister. She was like an older brother. And she had her way, boy, physically, there wasn't going to be anything. She became my greatest support right through the whole years. But growing up, I remember one time, no, I won't tell that story, but she was naughty and she was great. My oldest sister, I think she was the brightest of us. She didn't have the opportunity immediately to study, but became a librarian, a thing that absolutely suited her. She was the lady of the family. The second was a nun, great woman, had it in her head, a heart, and just a spirit. A great woman. And when I was going through, she had been a nun many years ahead of me. How old was she? Would have been about, how many years ahead of me? Maybe 6. And my mother was sickly, and she looked after me when I was a small boy. And then when I was in the seminary, she sort of debriefed me every year. I was the one, I was loose. She wasn't living where we were living in Melbourne. She was in Sydney or Brisbane, and I was able as a seminarian to go and visit her many, many times. And she'd sit down and we'd talk. Then there was Tony, my older brother. Tony's a wonderful guy. He has 5 boys and a real man of God. For instance, Tony, a rugged footballer, Australian footballer, he took for his confirmation name Mary. Now, for a man to sort of say, I want Mary as my confirmation name, was really something. Tony was a very good, practical fellow. And then there was Jenny, and she struggled a little bit academically and had 6 special kids. 6 special kids. And she lived her life and looked after her kids at God knows what cost. Then there was Terry, the one I love, my sister, younger sister. But she ruled the roost. She was the, whenever we'd do anything, we'd say, what does Terry say? She was a nurse and a very, very considerate, great woman. Younger than me was Martin. Martin was in insurance and that. He had a difficult life. We'll just leave it at that, a difficult life. And some of his best thing was when he joined the St. Vincent de Paul Society. I don't know whether you know it or aware of it, but they look after...
They are in Ghana, they are doing so marvelously.
Look, I think there's such a person as a Vincent de Paul man or woman. I'll look at him, I'll talk to him and I'll say, yeah, he's practical, he's got good brains, he's got an understanding and a big heart to look after people. No nonsense. Don't try and cheat him. You'll probably get beaten. But he's a tough guy, but a very good guy. Martin joined them, and he was the president in this little town for 9 years. And the headquarters said, Martin, what about your installation, and what about you're becoming president? Have you done all the... There was supposed to be a formula and people and presents and oath-taking. He'd been there 9 years as president, and he hadn't taken any ceremony or anything, but done wonderful work. His best thing was he made people sit down quietly and do a budget. And once they did a budget, he said, write down everything. And he said, now put your income. Now, he said, we've got to balance these. And he was able to help many, many people. One of the best things he did many good things. One of the best things he would ensure future salary for fathers. Say you had 3 or 4 kids, so you would insure yourself that if something went wrong, like today, the insurance company would pay your wages in the meantime, which is a wonderful thing. And I don't know the ins and outs of it. I didn't have to do it, but many people he saved and looked after. As a practical man, when the fires were in Victoria, he did many things. Snowy, who's my youngest brother, I say Snowy because I had black hair, most of us had dark hair, and we called him Snowy because he was blonde. And Snowy was the youngest, and he's 66 last week, and we still look at him as the baby of the family. Of course, he only has 4 kids, and Lord knows how many grandkids, but we still look at him as the baby, and we have to protect him. Of course, we blame him for everything, but we protect him. Parents, my dad, technician, serious type. He predicted many, many years ago, I remember in the 50s, yes, when transistors were just out. You weren't born. Transistors came, and this enabled miniaturization, cameras and things. Radios, it started with the transistor radio, small things, instead of big bulbs like light bulbs or tubes that you could plug in, and the radios were rather big, clumsy. Drop them, you broke valves. They call them valves, that's right. He had a great mind for mathematics. We were too scared of him because he couldn't understand why we wouldn't understand complicated mathematical problems. And we'd look at each other, your eyes would roll in your head. I didn't understand. But he was he could have done many things, but he was a technician in early days of telecommunication when they had linesmen and, hello, put me through, and physically doing all these things. Whereas once the transistor came, he saw computers and he said, there is the future. He had the wisdom. None of us were able to sort of go down that route, One became what did he become? He became an economist, my youngest brother. What do you call those people? An accountant. Then the other bloke was in insurance, and Tony was into managing a big firm of a farmer's co-op, like a huge hardware store. Anything that a farmer wanted, from medicine to feed to anything that a farmer needed, he would provide. Fertilizer. And then Mum grew. We're Irish background. Third generation. I'm third generation, fourth generation Irish, both sides. My mum came from a country girl, and she came. Mum was very sick. She had a lot of asthma, huge amount of asthma, and she was very sick for a long time. And my memories of my mother are greatly someone who looked after people, but was sickly a lot of the time. My brother, good story about my mother. My brother and I, Tony, they were all rather naughty, and someone would knock on the door, and we'd all look at our watches, and we would time between the visitor coming in and the time they had either a drink or food in their hand. If you came to our place, there was no way. You had to have something. But we would time it and time our mother. And she never caught us because we know the results of her ire. If she got angry at it, we didn't want that. But we would laugh. But she was very, very generous. I remember one time, 1956, we had immigrants, refugees from Hungary, coming to Australia, 1956. How do I remember? It was the Olympic Games in Melbourne. Hungarians had to get out because of the regime that was there, and some escaped. Some came to our place. The parish looked after them. They got them a home, and they'd come around. And my mother and dad, my mum especially, was very careful. And my mother, you know, a cauliflower, you have the white on the top and you have the green leaves underneath. Most of us, well, my mother, we'd cut the green stems and stalks off and just cook the white, and half the white we'd cut off and push to one side. My mother was preparing a meal one day, and this woman was there, and she started cutting up the stalks that came and eating them. Number one, they were raw. I'd never seen anybody eat raw stalks of cauliflower. And I'm looking like this, and my mother gave me the look that mothers give to tell you to shut up and behave. And after I said, Mum, did you see that? She said, Dominic, that person suffered from hunger, and they never had a chance, and they starved for many, many moons. And she cannot see food go to waste. There's stuff in that. We don't eat it, but she saw that. It was a great lesson to me about how appreciate someone else and how they do things.
Thank you so much. The program is The Conversation with Augustus, and I have with me Father Dominic, who has 50 plus years experience in missionary work. He has been working in the Philippines and in Australia. And you're also listening to us on Radio Angelus, the online radio station belonging to the Catholic Archdiocese of Accra. So Father, now let us look at your work at the Philippines. At which year did you actually arrive in the Philippines?
Arrived at the end of 1969. You arrived, and the first thing you do is go to language school. As I said, very difficult, especially for English-speaking people. Why? English-speaking people, we can survive anywhere. China, Afghanistan, Russia, Rome, anywhere, you name it, Africa, not so much South America, but you will survive with minimal English, survive. And once you survive, you become lazy. You haven't got the urgency to learn a new language, which is vitally important, because language will tell you about how people celebrate things, how people do things, when to laugh, when not to laugh, what sort of humor do they have, what sort of celebrations. For instance, in the Philippines, birthdays are so very important, and remembering the date, which I don't do. Names are very important. Spelling of names is very important. And I cheat all the time because I can't remember now. And so I call everybody, young men, handsome, and young women, beautiful. And if they're 80 or 16, I can get away with that. I think because I have white hair, but you learn, gradually you learn the culture, or part of the culture. You're never going to be absolutely at ease in the culture. And the most magnificent thing about Filipinos, they're so forgiving. You have one or two words of their language, and there are many, and they say, boy, you speak our language very well. And you know very well you've only got 2 or 3 words. So that's a bit different. So they're very forgiving, and the mistakes you make in language, you're going to make mistakes. To me, I didn't worry about it. My personality helps. I'm so curious and want to know why and this and that. And if I make a mistake, well, you fill in the little details. If you're a perfectionist, learning a new language is good and bad. Good because you'll get it well, but bad because you might concentrate so hard on getting the perfect word, the perfect tense, the perfect colloquialism, or whatever, that you miss out on communication. Communication is listening to what the other says, taking it in, checking it out, doing this one. You make mistakes on the line. They're only little things.
So let us look at your first parish.
My first parish priest, as an assistant, he was the first parish, and this guy, Jim Sheehy, great guy. He was 40 when I met him, and I was, 25. And unbelievable amongst Columbans, we were together for 3 years, We never had one argument. Not one argument. And I must have driven him crazy. But he had a development of people, whether they're young kids, teenagers, not married, newly married, older, middle-aged, all sorts of backgrounds. And he would listen to them and have their story and try and challenge them in a lovely way to become more and to give more to various people. This is what I learned from Jim. Great guy, Jim.
And what about the parishioners?
Parishioners. Well, parishioners were just so marvellous. The friends I made in the first parish, I've still got them. I'm here in Rome 50 years later, and every day they contact me. Are you all right? What's going down? So and so. If not the actual people I met, their parents, their kids. Their kids are now 50 plus years old. More.
You shepherded a parish where you had almost 50,000 parishioners. Tell us about that parish.
3 years with Jim Sheehy. No, it wasn't 3. It was a couple of years anyway. I was shifted up north to a parish, 50,000 on alone.
And how old were you then?
I was 26, 27.
Wow.
You didn't know anything. A different language area, but they spoke the national language. We'd sit down at a parish council meeting and there were 4 or 5 languages at the table, which it's bad enough if we all speak English, but if there's 4 languages, you're going to have absolute, there's going to be miscommunication. Fortunately, I don't know where I got it. I said, listen, I'm only 27. I'm only in from Australia. I don't know what's going on. If things don't happen, it's not my fault. You didn't tell me. Or you didn't give me options to choose. And there were some marvellous women and men there. One guy, he's a saint in my mind. We had a general assembly and he spoke in the middle of the assembly. And I stood up and just as my authority, I said, please listen. I said, this man is speaking pretty heavy stuff. And I believed in the charismatic centre or whatever, he was telling us what we should be doing. Absolutely clear before my mind, it was the Lord speaking through him. Many people laughed or didn't listen. That's the way it always is. But the men and women who were there were great. And the catechists there were fantastic. And above all, there was a group of sisters there, the Benedictine sisters of the Eucharistic King. And they were catechists to elementary kids, high school, college, and adult education. And even just walking with them was sufficient to do a great day's work.
Okay, so you were able to handle a parish of 50,000 congregants, and also you were able to help in establishing an ecological farm in the Philippines. Tell us about that.
The ecological came much later.
So in between the ecological period and then your second parish where you handle, what were you doing in between?
I did parish work again for a third and fourth parish, and then I was called by our superiors would I help set up a little magazine that spoke of missionaries, Philippine missionaries overseas. There was no such thing. The SVDs had missionaries, the Dominicans had missionaries, the Augustinians had missionaries, the Franciscan had missionaries, the sisters had many missionaries overseas. But there was no magazine which told their stories. Philippine missionaries. We didn't have any as Columbans, but we were just taking in at that time Filipinos to become Columbans. So the vision was of the editor to get stories and tell the stories of Philippine missionaries, to support them, to encourage them, to challenge perhaps some young people. This is what your fellow citizens, fellow kababayan as they call it, fellow Filipinos are doing, and to do that. He wrote it. I tried to set up a network of how to get the distribution. That's what I was on about. So I did that for many years, and I was called home to Australia in the meantime to run an office, and back again to that. Now in the meantime, my father even though he was a technician, had always said he'd always loved to have a little garden growing vegetables, just a little one. And we never had a rubbish bin outside our place. We reused or recycled every tin, every piece of cardboard, every piece of paper. And if it was degradable, we put it into the compost. And I remember him saying, Dominic, there's a compost mentality. Either you understand it or you don't. And he said, if we use all this stuff, we can make great vegetables and they'll taste good. And from that, I got into permaculture. I don't know whether you know permaculture, permanent agriculture. It's united with organics. It's united with aquaponics. Aquaponics, not hydroponic. Hydroponic, you put chemicals in and they grow on water. This one is you have fish in a tank, you pump the water up, and the nutrients, the nitrites will make flowers and make any vegetable grow. So I was always, it just excited me. And a guy in a parish who was a Navy guy and a Mexican-American, and he was into gardening and all this stuff, and he had a wonderful Mother Earth News. It was a magazine from the States, and it had different farming equipment, and it talked about organics and all. And I was always interested. And my very dear friend, priest friend, Columban, Frank Carey, he was interested in it too. And we did a little course on permaculture about principles of it and how to design, blah, 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 blah. And then we had another Columban who was interested in ecology and looking after the earth. And the three of us said, look, there's so much talk. There's so much talk about this stuff. And we all had other jobs. And our superior says, we can't let you go to do other things. But if you can do it in your spare time, you've got our blessing. So we had people talked about ecology. And so we founded a little place, a couple of hectares, to demonstrate both in an urban, a city, and a rural, a country area, possible things we could do to save the earth or to do things. And this was composting, organic farming, companion farming, worms and vermicast, IMO, indigenous microorganisms, which is, so you have some rice and you leave it out and you see what goes bad and you see it starting the what do you call it on the outside? Yeah, decompose. Well, you feed that with sugar and you make it into a thing and feed it and feed it and feed it. And that makes, and that's they're the little microorganisms coming from that spot. They get into it and you can make fantastic fertilizer. Oh, really fantastic. It will, if you spray it on stuff, it will keep pests away and it will be magnificent. For instance, pigs. You can have pigs in a very small area on a whole thing of, say, coconut or twigs or leaves and everything, and you spray that on and there's no smell of pigs. And we all know if the waste of pigs stinks. But if you spray the pigs with this and spray it on the ground, my Godfather, there's no smell. And all their waste just sinks down into this, and you continually just, and it's marvelous.
So, looking at your work in the Philippines, I will not be surprised that you were once appointed to be a bishop in one of the dioceses.
No way. I didn't have any postgraduate education. I had no use to it until I was given the opportunity to do some, renewal. The Colombians were wonderful society. They really encouraged everybody to do something. And by chance, and it was another Colombian who said it, you don't do things on your own. And he said, Dom, why don't you do a sabbatical? I couldn't go back to the books. I was frightened of books. And he said, and the SVDs had a wonderful thing here in Rome, namely 2 courses, renewal, updating, and a practical biblical thing. And I took the practical biblical course. Well, it was, I kept pinching myself, am I really here? Because I could never understand how come the Bible is our book, our book, Catholic book. And most of us don't know very much about it. As a matter of fact, we're in awe of it. As a matter of fact, we're sort of scared of it. We get overwhelmed. We get back. And I said, I would like to sort of take the overwhelming, the mystery out of it. It's still beyond me. It's still full of the Spirit, and you'll never get all the understanding. But at least it make it a practical book and a practical thing we can have to go to it and get inspiration from.
So you were never appointed a bishop,
Never.
which you refused?
Never, I'd never, no. And especially as an outsider missionary, you would, Columbans, few of us became bishops, but we would shrink back. We could see it was the end of our time. You call on our job as a Columban to call on local vocations, call on diocesan people. They're the ones to take responsibility for their people at this time and make decisions.
So what has been your toughest challenge as a priest with 50 plus years experience?
To keep close to Jesus.
Why?
Well, you make mistakes. You get so wrapped up in things like establishing this or that, or organising this or that, or being involved in whatever, marriage encounter, or biblical apostolate, or the ecological apostolate. And to keep on track, to keep being humble, and to keep personal contact with Jesus all the time. You don't do it alone. And I've just figured out, and I've got my way, I just say, hey, Lord, here I am. I'll give you my time. I don't know what's going to happen every day, but I'll give you my time. And Lord, bless whatever I'm doing, please. And make sure it's not my will, which could be good or could not be good, but I want to do it your way and how you want to do things. I think that's a bit ambitious, but that's how I am.
Thank you so much, Father Dominic Nolan, for this wonderful insight into your life as a priest, a missionary priest with 50 plus years experience. The program has been Conversation with Augustus Akins, and you've been watching us on my YouTube channel, Conversations with Augustus Akins. Don't forget to like or comment, share, and then also to subscribe to this channel. And as well, you have been listening to us on Radio Angelus, the online Catholic radio station belonging to the Catholic Archdiocese of Accra. Have a blessed day. This program was sponsored by Safe Life Experience Consult Limited. Contact them for all your travel and tour needs, as well as your events.